Welcome to Superintendent Radio Network. I'm Guy Cipriano, the editor of Golf Course Industry Magazine. This is the third episode in our disease discussion podcast series we're producing in partnership with BASF. This episode features a conversation with legendary Rutgers University turfgrass pathologist Dr. Bruce Clarke and BASF field representative and former golf course superintendent Paul Ramina. On this episode, Dr. Clarke and Paul will address anthracnose and summer patch. We'd like to thank BASF for supporting this podcast. BASF is always in the disease discussion with numerous solutions to help superintendents control anthracnose and summer patch. Visit betterturf.basf.us for more information. Now on to our conversation with Dr. Clarke and Paul. Well, Dr. Clarke and Paul, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate the both of you taking some time to discuss anthracnose and summer patch. And the first question is for Paul. Paul, you were a longtime superintendent in New Jersey. How much of your summer agronomic focus revolved around controlling anthracnose?
Well, hey, first and foremost, Guy, it's wonderful to be here with you and Dr. Clarke. I appreciate you having me on. This is a good topic to talk about, where we are now in the season. So for me, with anthracnose, it was interesting. I spent a total of 12 seasons in New Jersey, and I was growing. My main grass was bent grass. So for me, it actually wasn't a huge part of the program, but what was wonderful is that with the chemistries we have, I was able to build a strong foundation and kept the turf healthy. So bent grass, not so much, but in New York, when I was there in 2007, a big issue. We definitely have seen over the last 15, 20 years, a big change. I think at first, for me, it was top of mind. And dealing with POA bent greens, it was very focused. My program was very focused on it, but it was tough because we had some resistance issues. So we tried to build a program of cultural practices and fertilization to build, a healthier plant. And I know Dr. Clarke will probably be talking about that. So New Jersey, not so much as when I was in New York.
So, Paul, now you get to cover one of the golf-rich areas of the nation. You cover the New York metropolitan area. You're visiting a lot of superintendents in that region. How big of a concern is anthracnose among the people you work with now? How much conversation is there about it when you get into the tough summer months?
Yeah, it's a great question, Guy. What's interesting is, like I was saying, 15, 20 years ago, it was, it was really coming on strong. We had a mentality back then of the lean and mean, type of philosophy. It was something you were really, really looking at and trying to build up against. But now I would say with where we are with chemistries and learning more with the frat codes and the different classes and rotating, I think the guys are definitely aware of anthracnose. It's on their radar, but I feel a lot of them can look at it more towards a secondary disease when it comes to, conditions. With your program, it's almost like now you're building some strong fertilization programs, some strong fungicide programs, and strong cultural programs. So it's there for sure. And again, building your programs, I think, is where all the customers are looking at.
Yeah, and Dr. Clarke, you've helped hundreds, if not thousands, of superintendents control and learn more about a variety of diseases. But with anthracnose in particular, how much time have you spent with it over the years, and what have you learned about it throughout the course of your career?
Probably about half of my career has been spent working on anthracnose. Not alone, obviously. We've done a lot of work with my colleague, Dr. Jim Murphy, here at Rutgers. And also, this is part of a large multi-state research project over over a 10-year period, working with 12 universities, including some universities in Canada as well. So we spent a long time working on this. I think with the upshot is we've been able to develop a very good set of best management practices that I think have been very helpful to superintendents, I hope, and we're improving them, actually still continuing that research today.
Where do we see anthracnose? What parts of the country, Dr. Clarke, could this become a potential problem for golf course superintendents?
This is a problem really wherever the primary hosts are. The primary host of anthracnose, as Paul mentioned, definitely would be annual bluegrass, very susceptible host, and also some bents, particularly some of the older bents, like Pencross and some of the older bents, are very susceptible to anthracnose. Some of the newer, improved bents, a little bit less so, but any of these plants can get the disease if they're under stress.
What's the most misunderstood thing about anthracnose, Dr. Clarke?
That's an interesting question. I think it really, you go back to when we first started working on this research back around the late 1990s, that's when anthracnose was really becoming a tremendous problem. And at that time, everyone thought that the anthracnose was a stress-related disease and a wound-related disease. And probably the biggest misunderstanding there was that it's not a wound-related disease. Anything that's done to any bluegrass or bentgrass that weakens the turf will translate into enhanced anthracnose. But this pathogen does not need you to open the door to let it in. It's very aggressive, and if it's attacking a weakened plant, it gets in just fine without any wounds at all. And that, as I'll talk about a little bit later on, is a key to improving your disease control program.
Back to you, Paul. When should a superintendent start thinking about anthracnose control, or is it one of those things that should always be on a superintendent's mind?
Yeah, that is a great question, guys. You're definitely thinking about anthracnose. You're definitely have it on your radar through the season, especially in the summer. You know, you're like, oh man, did I do everything I needed to do to build this plan up prior to summer and the summer stresses? So you're thinking about it, especially the way I would look at it, and the way I talk to even now with customers is when you're developing your programs in the fall or towards the winter time, and you're making sure that you're looking at and going through and covering all your bases there.
Dr. Clarke, what type of conditions make turf susceptible to anthracnose?
Well, really anything that weakens turf, but particularly heat stress, drought stress, low mowing stress, and also low fertility. Those are the four major things which really enhance the disease. And out of those, probably, and maybe surprisingly to some, low nitrogen fertility is probably the driving force behind this disease.
When did you make that discovery about low nitrogen fertility? Was that something that you had known for years, or is that something that you discovered through more and more research?
No, that's definitely been something. The fact that low fertility enhances disease is something that we learned over a period of maybe 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. John Inguajato at University of Connecticut was at Rutgers, and as well as some other students, and they found very quickly that whenever we had low fertility in any of our research studies, that was always one of the biggest drivers of this disease. So the important thing to realize is that part of the best management program has to involve enhanced spoon feeding with nitrogen.
Dr. Clarke, when you're looking at developing a spray program for anthracnose control, what are some keys to developing that? What are some of your recommendations with the spray program for anthracnose?
Well, not surprisingly, our best spray program, we have some very good ones out there, will not control the disease completely if superintendents are not following good cultural management practices. And therefore, when we talk about BMPs, best management practices, when those BMPs are in place, superintendents will see their fungicide programs behave much more effectively, and the control is more longer term, and it's just better when you're following BMPs.
And how about you, Paul? What do you tell the superintendents you work with about developing a comprehensive program for anthracnose control?
Yeah, I got to tell you, just like I said, I've been very fortunate to work with Dr. Clarke through the years, and that's really what it is. You know your property, you understand it, you've been there, and you kind of work on your programs. You're developing that strong fungicide program. You know, you're working with the cultural practices like rolling and top dressing, trying to relieve the stresses on the plant. And like Dr. Clarke said, would be a help. You know, keep the plants healthy.
This is a good time to refer to the rotational spray programs provided by BASF and customized for your specific geo-region in the country. It's a spray program for the entire calendar year and considers growing season, climate, key diseases, and resistance management. Ask your BASF sales rep or find them at betterturf.basf.us behind the Solutions tab. Dr. Clarke, what are the consequences if the proper things aren't done when it comes to anthracnose?
Well, the consequences are basically reduced turf quality and definitely reduced performance, particularly on greens in terms of putting speed. And if they're following best management practices to the letter, they'll get better control. If they only follow part of it, they see reductions in control. So it's sort of like pieces of a puzzle. every piece of the BMP puzzle you put in place gives you better control and closer to getting excellent control with a good fungicide program.
Dr. Clarke, superintendents have been shying away from DMIs in recent years in their summer control programs. What are the perils of doing that?
Well, I think that's very true, and I think that's a mistake. Superintendents, in general, I think, have been using DMIs just fine in the spring and in the fall, but for some reason, many of them have been backing away in the summertime, and I understand why. Some of the older DMIs, particularly high rates, short intervals on green site turf, particularly green site annual bluegrass, often wind up seeing enhanced phytotoxicity, some yellowing, some browning, and because of that, I think people sort of shied away from the chemistry. Some of the newer products in the DMI group, particularly a product like Maxtima, has been shown to have really no major phytotoxicity. In fact, we worked with that product for 6 years, have never seen phytotoxicity at even double the label rate at green site in the heat of the summer. And that just shows, I think, that utilizing some of the newer DMIs that have less phyto issues is really a benefit and allows superintendents to put DMIs back into their program in the summertime. And this reduces the reliance on other chemistries like SDHIs, which are often overused, and it reduces the potential for resistance when you rotate chemistries such as DMIs back into your summer program without the concern of phytotoxicity.
Dr. Clarke, are you undergoing any current research or new research involving anthracnose? Where are we with learning about it here in 2020?
Yeah, we're continuing. We've been doing this for 20 years, but we're still continuing some very long-term studies. We're doing some pH studies, which are in the 9th year, and that's shown clearly that low pHs below 6.2 or 6.3 will enhance anthracnose. And we're also looking at the influence of some other nutrients such as calcium, which only very recently has come up to be to show basically that if you're in a calcium deficiency situation, you can actually get more anthracnose as well. So we're conducting or continuing our research with pH, with calcium, and then finally we're also continuing some of the work with potassium, which shows that potassium can also reduce that disease.
Now let's switch over to the summer patch. We'll get back to anthracnose at the end and where people can learn more about some of the research being done and some other things. But with summer patch, Paul, how often do you see it in your travels, and what part of a golf course is most susceptible to it?
Yeah, so with summer patch, definitely in my travels, we talked, especially last year, it was an interesting year. Really saw some flare-ups in intermediate rough areas around the greens as well, and then if you in your actual green surface, fairway surfaces as well. But I really last year saw a lot in intermediate. The biggest thing we've always talked about is it's in the spring, with preventative fungicide applications when that soil temp is stable around that 64, 65 degree temperature, and really start looking at your different fungicide classes to get out there on the golf course. But a lot of, so it's really, I've seen it throughout the courses, Guy, honestly, like rough, fairway, tee, greens, and you just kind of see it out there going.
Dr. Clarke, there are a lot of patch diseases out there. I was looking at some turf books here in our golf course industry office this morning, and there are various patch diseases. What separates summer patch from some of the other patch diseases that can be found on a cool weather golf course?
Well, the main thing would be species. Certain patch diseases, such as take-hole patch, primarily on bentgrass. Summer patch would obviously be more of a problem on annual bluegrass, although it can attack bent when bent is really on the ropes. But primarily time of year, summer patch is more of a problem, as the name implies, in the summertime, although infection, as Paul indicated, starts usually when the soil temps gets about 65 degrees and above. So in the mid-Atlantic states, that's probably somewhere around second, third week in May. Whereas take-hole patch usually starts up at green up when the soil temperatures are around 40 to 50 degrees. And so that disease, the infections start usually in April into May, and you can see symptoms right into the summer. So time of year, soil temperatures, and the hosts that are infected.
This is for either one of you. What should a superintendent be looking for when he or she's out scouting? lot of our listeners and followers know what to look for when it comes to things like dollar spot and anthracnose. What should they be looking for with their own eyes in regards to summer patch development?
Go for it, Paul.
Well, for me, when I was a super, and it's to look for now is the classic frog eye pattern.
Yeah, basically when they're scouting for it, the frog eye is a giveaway symptom. The only problem is, unlike dollar spot and some of the foliar diseases, when you see those diseases, you can spray for them, and it grows out pretty quick. By the time when you wind up seeing breakthroughs in your fungicide program, and you actually see summer patch, you're pretty much planning for the future. You're planning to prevent that from occurring.
Absolutely.
We talked about some of the keys for developing a successful program to control anthracnose. Dr. Clarke, what recommendations do you give with summer patch when you're developing a program for it?
Well, summer patch is affected by several factors, and therefore monitoring those factors. High pH is one factor. If you possibly can lower pH, our target pH recommendation would be a pH of 6.0. You can do that with acidifying fertilizers. Also, you want to make sure you reduce compaction. Compaction is a driving force of this disease, so that's a key in controlling it would be to reduce compaction. And you can do this through aerification. The key is, and I can't emphasize this enough, you do not want to aerify when you see symptoms in the summertime, because when you see symptoms, the roots are pretty well shot. Aerifying through plants that are just trying to hang on there would just push them over the edge. So you want to be aerifying when you don't see symptoms in the cooler weather, spring or fall. And you want to clean off your tines, sterilize them, just clean them off so you don't transfer the disease from infected turf to healthy turf.
This is for either one of you. There's no way we can make it through a disease discussion podcast without talking about rotating fungicides. How important are rotating products when you're talking about anthracnose and summer patch?
Rotation is key. Mm-hmm. I mean, rotation is important not only because you want to reduce the potential for resistance to develop, but it's also key for control. Good rotational programs will reduce the population of both the anthracnose and the summer patch pathogen. There are always multiple isolates on anyone's golf course, and therefore rotating chemistries almost assures you of keeping a population of these various isolates down, whereas repeated use of any product runs the risk of having more tolerant isolates predominate, become more of a problem down the road.
Yeah, and Paul, what are some recommendations you give with rotations and what superintendents should be doing in terms of switching up their products?
Percent guy with what Dr. Clarke was saying. I can go back to my example when I was in New York and the golf course, and we had a big resistance issue, and I'm talking if we were able to get 3 to 5 days out of a fungicide. So that fortunately, with even companies like BASF, we're able to develop and bring out even new chemistries to help us to switch it up, rotate, keep it, the way I look at it, you're keeping it fresh, keep it fresh, and you gotta have that approach. We want to use these products, so we want to make sure they're still available to use in the turfgrass system.
Dr. Clarke, Rutgers has tremendous resources for superintendents, not only in the Northeast and the New York City metropolitan area and the Mid-Atlantic, but really all over the country. Where can superintendents go to learn more about anthracnose and summer patch? Where would you tell them to go?
Well, there are a lot of online resources, obviously. Some excellent university websites. They can learn a lot. Rutgers University, Penn State, NC State, and other programs have great resources through their websites. But also, I'll put a pitch in for the Compendium of Turfgrass Diseases. We're actually working on it right now in the 4th edition, and this will be a brand new update coming out in 2021, and I think that's a great source, an example of a great source of information, new information for the control of any turfgrass disease.
Yeah, definitely put a pitch in for that. And how exciting has that project been, Dr. Clarke? When was the last time the compendium was updated, and what have you learned since that last update?
Well, this is the 4th edition.
Yep.
The 3rd edition came out in 2005, so it's been quite a while. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of water gone on the bridge since 2005, a lot of new things we've learned, and And what we're shooting for is about 40% new text, a lot of new pictures as well. And I think superintendents will find this to be a really worthwhile resource, something to have on their shelf, and also something they want to bring with them out on the course when they're trying to identify problems.
Yeah, and Rutgers also has a awesome turf diagnostics lab. Dr. Clarke, what would you tell a superintendent who may send a sample for some of these things? What guidelines would you give? What can a superintendent do to get a sample off to the team at Rutgers during those summer months where these issues may arise?
Well, that's a great point, because really you're only as good as your information, and things may look similar to what they've been in the past, but unless you're really sure, you're really not controlling these diseases properly. Mm-hmm. So really, I would say making sure you send a sample to diagnostic labs. Send a sample early in the week. You don't want to send it to arrive late in the day on Friday or over the weekend. It sits in the post office or UPS, one of these other sources, and it's really not a good idea to do that. You want to send it early in the week. You want to send a sample with some pictures to give the diagnostician a good idea of what's going on. And then any diagnostician will tell you, please fill out their diagnostic form. It gives them information such as when the disease symptoms first occurred, what the conditions were like, say, a day or two prior to symptoms. It really helps in the diagnosis.
Paul, I mean, superintendents in the New York metropolitan area have a lot of terrific resources like Rutgers University. What resources does BASF offer a superintendent who wants to learn more about these things or control anthracnose and summer patch? What does BASF offer superintendents?
So fortunate that we have great field reps, guys. We have great field reps throughout the country. We have great tech reps. Very fortunate there. We have a wonderful fungicide portfolio. You can visit www.betterturf.basf.us, and to highlight a few for anthracnose and summer patch, we have our Maxtima that we just came out with, new chemistry. It's methyltrifluconazole, it's a DMI, anytime, any turf, any temp. So we're able to use this product throughout the season when in times of the DMIs of the past, it's spring and fall, more shoulder months. So we have great fungicides that are available. Navicon is the combination of Maxtima and Insignia or Strobi. So we have all the products there, and we have Lexicon, which is an SDHI Strobi combo for us, and Honor and Trinity is our older DMI that does, like I said, works great in the shoulder season. So we have a lot of resources out there, and we're just a call away as well.
Well, Dr. Clarke and Paul, this was some great information. I bet when Dr. Clarke was visiting Paul on the golf course 13 years ago, or even probably longer than that, both of you probably never imagined you'd be doing something like a podcast together. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing the expertise with all of our listeners and followers.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful, Guy. Thank you so much.
That was a great discussion with Dr. Clarke and Paul. And before we get going, we want to remind you have a team of dedicated experts at BASF available to help with your toughest turf disease challenges. The technical and sales specialists know turf, your business, and the challenges you face daily. Contact your BASF sales representative today to locate the team member in your area. Visit betterturf.basf.us and select the Rep Finder tab.